Conflict is hard. And if we think of conflict resolution, we think that's the end of it. And it's not. We're people, right? We're always going to have conflict in our life. So, what if we could transform it into using that as sign point posts and for ways of building skill and then having ongoing dialogue rather than saying, oh, this is this one issue, it's resolved, let's carry on. Then the next thing comes up and the next thing and the next thing. So if we don't have the skills, we treat them separately when really it's all just a variation.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the IWillAim podcast. Our topic for today is conflict transformation. Conflict is often seen as something to avoid. But what if it's actually an opportunity for transformation, growth, and deeper understanding? Today, I'm speaking with Robin McTague, an expert in conflict transformation, to explore how we can turn tension into trust and disagreement into breakthrough. Welcome, Robin.
Thanks for having me. Nice to see you again, Will.
Likewise, I remember our time at Simon Fraser in Vancouver. I met a lot of great speakers and truly was fortunate to actually now have you a guest on my podcast. How about we kick it off with a quick introduction?
I'm, as you said, here in Vancouver, BC, and my background is psychology, counseling, and conflict resolution, all these different things. So I've really always been interested in why people do what they do, and it's kind of naturally led me here. And I do some other different things like meditation, because I really believe that we have this holistic view of life and we need to take care of ourselves in all ways. And people want to bring their full selves to what they do these days. You know, it's kind of transformed our workplace over time.
Thank you for sharing your background. I want to start with conflict is hard. Often, as I started the intro, is conflict is something at times we avoid, if not at times, most of the time we avoid, because we don't feel good about it. Why did you get into the field of helping people resolve conflict?
Because I didn't know how to deal with it either. You know, I grew up in a family that was really difficult. My mom was suicidal. I remember the first time I was 4, when first attempt I actually remember. And so she avoided it. She was very quiet, scared. And then my dad, he was an alcoholic and would rage. And so you never knew what he was going to do. So we all kind of hid away. And so how that played out for me was becoming passive aggressive, swinging between those two things, like pushing it down until it exploded, or, you know, doing something that really self-sabotaged me. And I find a lot of people have that kind of view. They don't understand it. They don't understand their emotions. And so I thought, I have to train in this. And I worked in a large organization that I got to do a lot of different things where I did join committees and help to bring different things together. And I really enjoyed that work.
Well, thank you for, first of all, thank you for a very hard story that you shared. And secondly, I think I want to thank you for actually doing this work because you're enriching a lot of people's life. So let's sort of deep dive on the topic. Conflict transformation sounds different from conflict resolution. Can you explain what it means and how it changed the way we view disagreements?
Like you said, conflict is hard. And if we think of conflict resolution, we think that's the end of it. And it's not. We're people, right? We're always going to have conflict in our life. So what if we could transform it into using that as sign point posts and for ways of building skill and then having ongoing dialogue rather than saying, oh, this is this one issue, it's resolved, let's carry on. Then the next thing comes up and the next thing and the next thing. So if we don't have the skills, we treat them separately when really it's all just a variation. You know, I talk about that even with when we're in relationship. It's more about what is the level of intimacy. So, you know, we have our work colleagues all the way to our partner in life. So it's the same thing. We have different levels of how we deal with conflict. and to what degree we need to deal with it.
So I kind of want to dig down a little bit about this. If someone's working with you to learn how to handle conflict or how to deal with conflict, what's the engagement looks like? Like, what's a typical? I guess typical is not the right word, but how do they work with you, and how do they grow their experience on handling conflict?
Yeah, it really depends on the situation, whether it's one on one or a couple or a team. So it's really starting with what's going on for you right now. We need to start with people where they're at. And so for some people, maybe more advanced, they might have a little bit of skill. Other people, they maybe have no idea and don't really have that self awareness, how they're playing into it. Because often we will go into those places where we think it's the other person. If they would only change, then it'd all be okay, whether it's in our relationships, in our family, our community, our work. And we have to realize that we both bring information and our background into the conversation. So we often have assumptions
Mm,
about the other person, and we think people understand us when they don't, because we have different ways of viewing the world and
mm.
we have different ways of engaging. And so I start with some self awareness tools because most people think they're pretty self aware.
But they're
And
not.
unfortunately, not, because the research does show, 95% think they are, 10 to 15% actually are. And so, if we can get past that barrier to understand this is just normal in life, because often people think there's something wrong with them. So, I really like to start with understanding you're not different, you're not unusual, there's nothing wrong with you. These are just skills that you haven't learned. Because we look back in our family, did they have the skills? No, very few did. So it's just a learning process. So the more that we can relax about it and treat it as I'm just learning a process and I'm not going to be perfect, it's really the starting of the mindset.
I love the concept of learning a process. Not that you're not good or something's wrong with you, but learning the process and developing that mindset, because that helps you move in the right direction. As people work with conflicts, what are the common emotional patterns that prevent people from being productive in resolving conflicts?
I would say the number one is that we believe that people should just get on board. It's like this, we start to treat people all the same rather than understand each person is individual. They have their own background, they have their own needs and wants, and what energizes them. So I have some processes I do that helps people to understand, yeah, this is just what's important to that person. It's not a personal affront. So we bring in a neutral language to be able to say, this is what's important to you, this is what's important to me. And in a workplace, we can actually look at reward strategies because not everyone's the same, right? It used
Mhm.
to be the old carrot and stick, like everyone wanted the money, but it's not about that necessarily anymore. So when we can individualize it and start to understand each other and what's going on, that's really the basis to begin to look at it on a deeper level and really that starting point.
I think I love the concept of understanding one another, because that sort of give people the grace, right? I think that's really good. Are there any specific framework or practice or tools that you use?
I have the number one tool I use is called a motivational map. And when I had it done, I just was so blown away. It's like, how can you know that about me? And it looks at what energizes us because our top three motivators account for 60 to 70% of our behaviors. And then that bottom one can be the one that we dismiss it in other people. So, for example, if I'm an entrepreneur and I see you as this person who's out there on social media and, Will is doing so great, but there's some reason I don't really like him and I don't understand why. When I can see one of his motivators is around being a star and being seen and acknowledgement, that's just what it is. And if I'm a business owner, if I don't have some of that, then I can start to see the value and reframe that to say, I need a bit of that. I don't have to be as out there as Will. And at the same time, if I don't do anything, how does anyone know about my business? So we get to look at what are the things that are going to work for you. So maybe it's not social media. Maybe it's more about relationship building. And so you do more networking. And in a team, it can be, I'm being given jobs that or parts of my job that don't really interest me, and I don't really understand other people who do that, and I don't understand where that both internal and external tension comes from. And
From your experience, what distinguishes leader that handle conflict well versus those that don't?
it really starts with the self-awareness because, for example, if you have one of the motivators is director, so you like to be in charge. But if you have too much, people aren't going to be coming along because it's like, just do it my way. If we don't build in some of the relationship skills and then the growth skills. So we have three kind of buckets of motivators. And, motivation has been so poorly defined in the past and misunderstood. And when we understand, yes, this particular role does need some director, and at the same time, how are you going to bring in those other skills that maybe aren't natural to you, you're not really interested in? So, what is some training, or how can I have someone come in and support me in being able to bring those other skills in so everyone feels seen and heard?
If there's someone out there who's listening to us and wants to take the right step to learn how to improve their ability to handle conflict, how should they connect with you and reach out to you?
The main website is alifeofchoice.ca since I'm in Canada, and positiveteamengagement.com. But you can get there from the first one. So alifeofchoice.ca is your best bet. And my email is Robin, as you see the spelling with a Y, at alifeofchoice.ca. And I'm on LinkedIn as well.
Well, thank you for sharing that. For organizations that want to shift the needle in the right direction and implement a process or a function to help them handle conflict in a better way, how do you suggest that they should approach that?
Really take the time to figure out what's going on, first of all, because often when we're leading an organization, we're often looking at the production. And so it's like we're busy, 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 especially if we're in that growth stage. And then what happens is the people kind of get left behind. And so you're trying to play catch up, or you don't realize all of a sudden people are unhappy and you're getting staff turnover and these kind of things. So it's like taking that pause, and it feels like, oh, that's just one more thing to do. But it's to really understand, if you take that pause, have people understand what's going on, because people have different communication styles. We use Maslow's hierarchy of needs as a kind of base to show that at the bottom, people are more relationship based, and people at the top, they just want the bottom line. They're the high growth people, like next, 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 which a lot of leaders are. And that's why they've done well in their organization. And we need to bring those other people along. And also look at how are we doing for change? How are we dealing with change? And this is one of the things the assessment does, is to look at your change index scores. Is the change too fast or too slow? And then looking at the people that have those different ways of looking at it, and then making sure they all get the information they need.
You mentioned change, and change is one of the hardest things to undertake. How do you help organization not only adapt to change but also handle the conflict that arise in between the people that are all part of change?
Yeah, I think it helps to have a model. One of the ones that I still think is pretty good is the William Bridges, where, we have this and then we have this, and in the middle is that void. And so, how can we help people to understand that there is this phase that you're going through? So, again, you're not making people wrong. And the speed of change right now is so fast, right? We want to bring in the AI, one, do this. And some people's heads are spinning. It's like it's too much. So, how can you normalize change, because that's really the only constant, and at the same time have some compassion for yourself and your staff about that speed and what's required. I went through a process in an organization where we went from paper files to online, and that was huge for some people. And just learning tech skills was not their forte. So, starting small, making sure that you're adding bits of training in and not expecting it to be overnight. It's not going to work. And then you have the failure at the end. So, slow down, really look at the steps, map it out, and then what are the people skills? What are the supports they need to be able to move with it?
Thank you for sharing that. For someone's listening to our episode today, what are your two or three takeaways from handling conflict?
Number one, I would say, is to have a curiosity mindset. So, one of the phrases I learned in my training was be curious, all behavior makes sense, at least to that person. So, how can I allow myself to have the reaction, kind of pause, what's going on for me? And instead of immediately responding, take the time to get curious and ask questions. Tell me more about that. Is that something that's really important to you right now? Like, we don't know what's going on for them. It could be something outside of the situation that's impacting them, and they're just feeling extra stressed. We don't know. Or it could be they feel that there's some injustice, often an injustice story that plays in our head for a bunch of different reasons. So if we can open up the dialogue and not be reactive, that opens up the discussion. Because if we just come from, this is how I think and this is how you think, too bad, just do it, we're not going to have a long term relationship, whether in whatever part of our life that is. So I would say that's number one. And the other is that taking a breath and pausing and really, what is going on for me? Maybe I'm being triggered by something that isn't even related to the situation. We see this with anger a lot, the road rage. The person hasn't dealt with their anger. Our societies are so bad with dealing with anger and with grief, and it builds and builds and builds till it explodes. And so this poor person that had nothing to do with the original issue is now the brunt of that, just so that I feel better because I get to feel like it comes off of me, but it doesn't, right? It just continues to cycle through.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing the takeaway. If you're listening to this episode and you like what you hear, comment, like, and also reach out to Robin. I think one of the best things you could do for yourself is to learn about handling conflict. And Robin is the expert in that space. Robin, thank you very much for your time today. Really appreciate you being a guest on my podcast. Thank you very much and have a good day.
Thank you.